Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it is going to be fairly mild and fairly dry further southwards, but milder and wetter further northwards. Like you see at the moment, we've got rain moving through west to east, so some areas will see heavy rain, other areas will stay drier. However, as we head into next week, it's not only turning a lot more unsettled for all, but it is also turning colder as well. Some really quite cold Arctic air is going to come into the mix, and at the moment we can't quite pinpoint where that cold air will go. Will it stay further northwards, giving potentially cold and wintry conditions for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, or will it even push further southwards, not only bringing low pressure with it and lots of areas of precipitation, but of course snow, maybe even into England and Wales. We're seeing a whole array of scenarios through today, because it's not a sort of traditional blocked pattern. Where that rain and snow line does develop is hugely varying between runs, so it is going to be one to really watch. But we'll run through what the latest operational runs are showing you in the second half of the video, just highlighting that massive amount of uncertainty and why some areas it could just be really wet next week and horrible, other areas it could be almost a winter wonderland out there. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see it is mostly dry, but we have got this rain further northwards. It is moving west-east with the jet stream slightly further northwards at the moment, and that means most of the low pressures are well to our north. It means for most areas, it is dry and, relatively mild, with the air mass coming in from parts of the mid-Atlantic. You can see at the moment temperatures are generally pretty mild, a little bit of chilly air developing at the surface, bit of an inversion under the higher pressure, but generally in the day it is relatively mild for the time of year. Many areas, especially the further westwards you get, with that more of a west or southwesterly flow into the double digits, and that will continue over the coming days. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, you can see that rain moving through west-east through this evening, and into tomorrow you could see more areas of drizzle and rain around, but really nothing too much. Generally another dry but fairly dull day. As we head into Saturday, again, some showers in the north, maybe a bit of drizzly rain further southwards, but again, nothing crazy. Into Sunday, bit more rain further northwards, but doesn't look too heavy, but pretty persistent, so it could be relatively miserable there through Sunday, and then eventually that rain does slowly clear, but it moves southwards. It moves initially northwards through Sunday, and then it pushes southwards into Monday, and that is because the jet stream is starting to track further southwards, and that is setting up the risk of cold and wintry conditions as we head into next week. You see the low pressure pushing southwards and rainfall actually intensifying as it moves into England and Wales, because that temperature contrast is getting much greater, and you can see a lot of showers across Scotland starting to turn to snow. So the next 4 to 5 days, relatively dry further southwards, relatively mild as well. Further northwards, still pretty mild, but areas of rain around before things start to change as we head towards Monday and Tuesday next week. Now, if you look at the upper air temperatures, you can see that dividing line. Mild air in the south, much colder air in the north. At the moment, though, look, we're dominated by milder air, but that colder air is slowly seeping in from the weekend into the start of next week, and it could really gain a foothold into next week and bring the risk of potentially some heavy snow in places. Now, if you look at the 2 metre temperatures, you can see through this afternoon double digits in a few spots, but more around that sort of 8 or 9 degrees, still relatively mild, still above average for the time of year. As we head into tomorrow, even milder, maybe 10 to 12 degrees, so really quite mild for early February indeed, and that does continue into Saturday as well. Could be a little bit chillier further northwards, but most still in around that 9 or 10 degree mark, even 13, 14 degrees seen there across parts of the Midlands. Into Sunday, cooler air slowly getting pushed away again, and we're seeing double digits for most areas, 10 to 12 degrees. And then into Monday, things start to shift. Still mild, but that wind direction is changing. And into Tuesday, much colder air filtering into Scotland, and you can see a very strong dividing line between the very mild air, very mild, moist Atlantic air, and the much drier, colder Arctic air slowly moving in. Now, it's difficult to see this on the UKV because it doesn't get cut off at day 5, but as we'll see now from the longer range runs, The days following this is where we have some real possibility of some incredibly disruptive but interesting weather nonetheless. So if we do look at the latest GFS and run through what that is doing over the coming days, you can see jet streams further northwards. That black line, the divider between the low pressure and high pressure, is to the north of Scotland. But it slowly sinks southwards as we head into early part of next week. And look, it clears well to our south by next Thursday. And look at this, southerly tracking jet stream. And we see low pressure develop on the southern flank. Cold air seeping in from the north brings the risk of heavy snow. Now, if we look at the upper air temperatures, initially the very cold air is only in place further northwards. So here, next Wednesday, Thursday, would be snow for northern England, northwards. Further southwards would be rain. However, that cold air wraps in on the back edge, and that is where we could see more widespread heavier snow, and we stay in that cold air until day 10. And beyond that, we see more southerly tracking lows. We do lose the cold air because we don't have a succinct block, which could develop, might not develop. We can't really say for certain. This is now at the sort of day 11, day 12 time frame, but still keeping that southerly tracking jet stream, for eventually we see high pressure building over the top of us. So even though a milder air would try and push in, it would probably still remain fairly chilly. Now, if you saw the video from yesterday where we had the ECMWF weekly anomalies, they had a very strong blocking signal across parts of Greenland, towards Iceland and Scandinavia. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next few days if this blocking signal got a little bit stronger. Again, it's not guaranteed. I'm purely going off what some of the longer range charts is showing. But they're definitely showing a much stronger block there. So there is a real possibility that this pattern that we're seeing developing next week could actually be a bit more sustained and a bit more blocked than it's currently showing. I doubt there'll be a substantial shift because we would be seeing rumblings of that at this stage. But there could be definitely a bit more of a stronger block there. And if that does happen, that could hold that colder air in for longer periods. Now, I do just want to show you the precipitation from this because it is sometimes difficult to sort of portray what sort of conditions we could be seeing when just looking simply at pressure charts. So I thought it's best if we just had a look at this GFS chart, precipitation chart here, just to give an idea of the sort of conditions we could be seeing. I do emphasise on the could, because although we will not have a look at the GM or the ECMWF, they will be substantially different with the rain snow line much further northwards. Now here you can see initially the cold air moves in for Scotland by next Wednesday towards next Thursday. Rain further southwards initially here, but as the low pressure bumps into that cold air, next Wednesday night we start to see heavy snow across the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and much of Northern England. Here though, that low pressure does eventually pull out into the North Sea, and we start to see that snow drift further southwards, and we actually see some heavier snow across parts of the Midlands and even into southern and eastern England there as we progress towards Thursday and Friday. After that, eventually the cold air does pull away and we will stay chilly before eventually a bit more of a westerly flow moves back in to start the following week. But regardless, it does go pretty cold and potentially very snowy in places for a good 3 or 4 days there. So nothing too prolonged at this stage. That just shows you what could be on the cards if we do see that jet stream push far enough southwards. As I said though, the positioning of the lows and the positioning of the rain and snow line could be vastly different to what the GFS is showing here. For example, a run that is vastly different is the GM. Now, over the coming days, we are seeing a westerly flow continuing, and eventually the jet stream does push southwards as we head towards next week, but it doesn't push far enough southwards. It needs initially next week, and that means that the low develops further northwards, and this means the cold air is really actually to the north of Scotland before eventually wrapping in the subsequent days. But here, this would produce a lot of rain, potentially a lot of heavy rain with that, and maybe a bit of snow across northern Scotland, but really nothing to speak of at all when it comes to winteriness, with that snow line much further northwards. So hundreds of miles difference there as we head towards next week. So that is quite a big difference in air mass at 6 or 7 days, potentially 10 to 15 degree difference at 850 HPA between two runs for sort of 6 or 7 days time. So huge discrepancies are being seen here, and that's why it's going to be very difficult to pinpoint exactly what we're going to be seeing next week. Now, if you look at the ECMWF, just to compare, this has only just come out, and you can see again a westerly flow over the coming days. Eventually that jet stream pushes southwards. Again, it's a little bit more delayed like the GM, but that low develops slightly further southwards, and it actually means that yes, southern areas takes a while for that cold air to move in. It does eventually go quite a bit colder. If we run it back and have a look at the upper air temperatures, this time next week the cold air is in for Scotland, and it's just about in for northern England. The mild air pushes in, but it quickly gets pushed away, and the cold air does wrap in for all. So it would be similar to the GFS, but definitely would be a little bit more delayed, because in the GFS the rain line never got much further north to northern England, whereas here it does push it back into Scotland. Again, very interesting runs today, and it is going to be very difficult to pinpoint exactly what is going to happen. So we'll just have to keep you updated over the coming days, but just wanted to highlight there is a substantial risk of some snow next week, but we really can't say exactly where at the moment. Now, if you look at the latest ensembles, these are the latest GFS, you can see for London, the next week it's mild, and you can see this heavy precipitation is when that cold and snow risk does substantially increase. But not for London, or not for southern areas initially, because you can see the big dip around that day 8, day 9 point, where most runs here on the GFS, most ensemble members do go cold, if not very cold, and actually stay pretty chilly. So the longer term outlook after we see those lows move through is for quite a cold outcome to be seen, but it's just how does it get there. You can see, though, substantial precipitation next week, so even if we don't see snow, there's going to be some very unsettled conditions around. Lots of heavy rain and pretty horrible conditions for many. Look at the dew points, you can see substantial shift from 8 or 9 degrees down to -2, -3, maybe down to -5 to -10. And, of course, we need to see cross-model consensus. If we look at the midnight run of the ECMWF, because the midday run hasn't updated yet, you can see it is very similar. Mild next week, but still a few runs keeping us colder before we do see most runs go below average, if not significantly below average, as we progress towards the middle part of February. And if we compare to Glasgow, you can see they go colder, or Scotland here. So if you do compare to Glasgow, you can see Scotland goes much colder, much faster, down towards the -5 line in as soon as 5 or 6 days. So by sort of next Monday, Tuesday time, meaning the precipitation moving in will most likely fall as snow. But you can see there is some milder runs there. That's all dependent on the positioning of the low. If we do have a look at the GFS, actually less bullish. So Eastern WF actually pushing that further southwards. The GFS operation run, a little bit of an outlier actually in terms of how far northwards that milder air mass does get. So it is a big headache for next week. We know the overall pattern, southerly tracking jet stream, low pressure developing in that dip, pushing up from the south, wrapping in with much colder air, but we really don't know exactly how the air masses will develop at this stage. You can see the difference here in around 5-6 days time. Definitely the higher risk is further northwards. I'd say there's sort of a 70-80% chance we do see some quite heavy snow further northwards. Further southwards, it is going to be very touch and go, all dependent on how these lows do develop and how far southwards that jet stream does, pushing in, and how much blocking we see in the North Atlantic. As I said, a lot of the longer range runs do have a substantial blocking developing. We are seeing some, but I wouldn't say substantial at this stage. So perhaps either the weekly anomalies are overdoing it, or perhaps the operation runs at the moment, the ensembles, are slightly underdoing it. If they slowly increase that blocking over the next couple of days, then I wouldn't be surprised for more of the colder runs to prevail. Said we'll have to see over the coming days, but the risk is there for something quite a lot colder, potentially very snowy in places as we head to next week. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.